Call this April 23rd, 2013 City Council work session to order.
All business.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor J. Max Davis.
Here.
Councilwoman Rebecca Chase Williams, District 1.
Here.
Councilmember Jim Meyer, District 2.
Here.
Councilmember Bates Madison, District 3.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Gebbia, District 4.
Here.
All present.
All right. I have no opening remarks. Is there a pre-meeting agenda review? Yes. So here's the agenda for tonight's council meeting. Marie, you have anything on this? Or
Excuse
Bill?
me, I'm sorry. No,
No on the agenda review?
correct, nothing.
Anybody have any questions or comments about it?
The police services, did we ever see that?
No.
Police services it was just carried over because it was deferred the last time. It's still deferred.
But has it been changed and updated? I mean, last time you were still negotiating. Have we seen the final draft?
We have everything except the payment worked out.
Okay.
And that is something of the football that's still being bounced around. But the reality is, though, we have a number, and that's what we needed to have, is the definiteness of the number, and now it's simply a matter of how it works out, how the payments come.
Let's see if we can get the number approved.
So I hear you just say you want to defer it tonight?
It's not on the agenda.
It was carried over because it was carried over the
Old
last
business.
time.
Under old business?
It's the first one.
First page.
K1. Very bottom.
But the request is to table it for
It
2 more
is.
weeks.
I had a discussion with the deputy county attorney on Friday, and at her suggestion, the new county manager is going to contact the city manager to see if they can work out the terms of that.
I understood that our new police chief, Gary, had some comments. Has he made any input to that IGA about anything? Or is that, just heard some of that? Well,
He has reached out to the DeKalb Police Department, so they are communicating,
yeah.
getting information to the point of being able to capture data for reporting back to you all.
Yeah.
So we should be getting that right away.
You know.
So the delay on this, you don't think hurts our efforts at all to get full reporting, and I think you're hoping for a little bit more just feedback and accountability from him.
No, I don't think so. I think the transition from the previous county manager to the new county manager is looking at the payment schedule a little differently than what we had all understood. Oops.
And within that IGA, does it define the actual, like, how many beat officers are going to be on the beat and at what times a day or anything like that?
No.
No. It's really
It's just something we have to get through.
Yes.
something right,
Yeah.
and they are doing the best they can. And the good news now, and the better news, is we now have a chief and his deputy that is in contact with them and requiring performance.
Right. Right.
All the officers on the street are working as hard as they possibly can. They're all committed. It's simply a matter of how much manpower will be allocated. And historically, in none of the new cities are you ever able to really control that.
Right.
Fortunately, in this instance, we have the ability to control the cap the costs, and we don't have to go through a fight over what they did or didn't do.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, number 1 under new business.
Yes, stormwater ordinance. We wanted to talk with you just a little bit about that. And on your agenda this evening is a first read for the stormwater utility. We have been in communications with DeKalb County, Ted Reinhardt in particular, and Richard's here, he can give you more detail. Giving them notice, and we'll give them formal notice through our city attorney's office that we intend to take over the stormwater utility program And this ordinance just describes the program, creates the program, and it will be followed with a resolution on what the fee schedule will be, which you all will adopt. So for now, we're just moving forward to create the utility and then come back. Richard, you want to add?
And the ordinance also creates it also has the language to create the actual enterprise fund that will house the funds that are collected by the stormwater utility.
When we take this over, that utility fund, is that day one, or do we get any fund that's been collected from our residents from the county to date, or is it from the beginning of the year? Or
They collect it at the end of the year, and then we will expect that and we plan for that to be remitted back to us. Now, there's going to be a truing up of that. The county in responding to their maintenance program or complaints or repairs, they have kept a list, and Richard has kept a list on his response to citizens for stormwater matters. So what we'll do is we will get their list, which they plan to deduct from the full amount of funds collected, and then we will send ours in and then increase that back because he has been keeping up with everything they've been doing.
And actually the way the fee is, because it will go out on the city tax bills this year, we will collect all the money, and it will be a case of DeKalb County actually billing the city and us remitting payment for the work that they've done until we fully take it over.
Are we going to have an opportunity with the aerial that we flew sometime earlier this year to update particularly the commercial lots and pick up a lot of the newer development that may or may not be on the
it's going to be a matter of are we going to get that photography in town to be able to do that, because we're going to have to get the information to the tax department at DeKalb probably by the middle to the end of May. So we may not. We're working right now though, going through the files to update that to make sure all the commercial properties are included, that we're at least doing some spot checking to make sure that the commercial areas are right, making sure all the parcels that are in the city are included in there properly.
Are we, and this is GIS working with Public Works and Development to get electronic copies of new developments in the city so we can plug those in and hopefully be a little bit?
We will be. I mean, it's part of the process of starting up as we get a new development going in. That will be something we will have to do, is make sure that we get in the system so that when we generate impervious areas, or even for residential units, because they're billed at a flat fee for a residential unit, that we're capturing all the residential properties. Correct.
Our residential is 3,000 square feet, which is, at the 35%, that's roughly an 8,000 square foot lot. We've got lots that are higher and bigger than that. If we looked at that number?
We haven't. The way DeKalb County has always run their program, and this is more getting into the fee structure that we'll present in a separate resolution, but generally residential lots are a flat fee. Currently, DeKalb County in the past has had it at $48 per year. That's what we're waiting on DeKalb to decide what they're doing with the fee. The 3,000 square feet is the equivalent unit for a residential lot. And that's really, we're talking about impervious area, not lot area. That's for commercial lots. Get billed 1 unit for every 3,000 square feet of impervious area. And that's rounded off usually to the 10th of a unit, or the unit, 10th of a unit, and they get billed that times the single unit rate.
Is that on par with the residential rate?
Yeah, it is the same residential rate. A residential unit is one unit.
Right.
And so if a commercial has 3,000 square feet of impervious area, they have 1 unit. If it's 6,000 square feet, 2 units, so forth.
And do you think that those numbers are in line with the actual maintenance cost of the?
Yes, if anything, with what at the $48 level, based on what DeKalb has experienced, based on what surrounding cities in our area have experienced, the $48 isn't enough to cover. It's barely enough to keep up with the maintenance. And as the system is aging, we have a system that's 40+ years old in many neighborhoods.
What is our,
Yeah.
I would think that Dunwoody's experience, I know that they had taken over the stormwater, would
Yes.
be very similar to our
Mhm.
potential experience. And what's your gut feel on how we should best plan for some of the repairs that we're bound to?
I mean,
require?
that's what we're doing. The one advantage we have over Dunwoody is DeKalb has already done the inventory work for us.
Okay.
So we have that data, we've received that from the county, we're starting to go through it, so we'll be able to relatively quickly develop an idea, a needs assessment, a capital improvement plan, short-term and long-term for the system, so we'll know how to budget the money that we're collecting within the fund. Dunwoody didn't have that inventory. They had to spend money out of their stormwater utility their first 3 years just to collect the inventory and do the needs assessment. We're going to be a little bit up in front of them. We'll be able to start making repairs and put more towards repairs and maintenance up front because we won't have to do that inventory.
Do you have any kind of gut? It sounds like the rates for our city stormwater fees are going to go up down the road.
DeKalb County is in the process now of considering raising their rate
Right.
from $48 a year to $60 a year.
Right.
Dunwoody last year raised theirs to $68. I think it's $60 or $69 a year.
Yeah.
It went to 96.
Huh?
It went to 96.
Not in Dunwoody. Dunwoody went to 68.
Okay.
$68 per residential unit.
Makes a difference.
There's a need there, and at the 60, DeKalb has done the assessment, they've done the studies to show that there is a need at the $60 level for funding the system.
Sure.
To some extent, we need to rely on, because we're not having to do our own studies to adopt this, we have to rely on the studies DeKalb did in the justifications they have for that when we adopt our resolution and our fee structure. So.
Well, I think, and we were talking about these rate changes would be in effect on city residents for this year, or are we talking for 2014 tax bills?
It depends on how we do the proposal will be, depends on how we do the resolution. I mean, that's an option to look at is we could keep it the same this year, then raise it next year, or we could go ahead and raise it to match what DeKalb's doing this year. That's up for the council to decide.
Richard, do you have an estimate of what that $48 existing would fund for the city of Brookhaven?
I think, I know there were some numbers in the Vincent study. We're going through, at least what we got from DeKalb County, the number was about 1.2 to 1.3 million. I don't have an exact total yet. And although we think there's some properties missing from that, it could be as much as 1.4 to 1.5 million, but somewhere in that range at the $48 level.
Well, I couldn't remember if the Vincent study actually looked at true parcels or just a pro rata share.
I'm not sure of the details of the Vincent
but
study.
You think,
got it here, I'm going to pull it up.
but the DeKalb County is on true parcels?
The file they sent us has, I think right now at 1.2 million, but there are parcels we know are missing or incorrect in there that when we go through and get everything the way it should be, it's going to be in that 1.3 to 1.5 million dollar range at the $48, the current rates.
And that's what you're trying to get done before, if you get that information to the tax assessor, so it hits in this
year, yeah. Now, whether we do the rate, I mean, the rate part of it is
another issue.
We just have a formula in there, so whatever the rate is, and we'll recalculate it. But we're working, the files we got from DeKalb of what they did in basically their 2012 files is what we have, and that's what we're going through and updating, is using the 2012 rate, which was the $48.
Has the cap, they're at 48 now.
They're at 48. They have a agenda item which they have deferred for several months to raise the rate to 60. There was actually, they're holding their last public hearing on May 2nd. Two of the county commissioners, I think it's going to be in North DeKalb, I'm not sure of the exact location of it. But they are having their last public open house on for citizens to be able to come in and make comments about the stormwater fee, and for DeKalb presumably provide education and backup as to why it's needed. And they're under the same deadline. If they're going to raise their rates for the 2013 bills, they're going to have to pass it at their May, no later than their May county commission meeting, because they have to get it on the tax bills as well, so.
And when is our anticipated date of actually taking over billing?
Well, by passing this ordinance and taking over the stormwater utility, we will be billing this year, 2013. So we will have to pass a resolution, or the council will have to pass a resolution with the rates in there. We haven't determined, you know, that rate is still to be determined.
All right, number 2.
I have one more question, please. Do you mind? Talking about this inventory, you made 2 comments. You said the system is about 30 to 40 years old, so it's going to take some type of update.
More than that.
Well, I'm being kind.
Yeah.
And then you made a comment that the inventory was about 75% analyzed from DeKalb County.
DeKalb County, the information that DeKalb County provided us, they've done a 100% inventory of the system where they've gone and looked at every pipe, done a condition assessment of every pipe, and it's in the GIS now.
Yeah, that was my question. Was this a visual roadside evaluation, or was it actually underground?
It was, they looked into each pipe and into each drainage structure. They did not video the pipe, so they didn't go down the pipes to see every single problem, but they did a basic visual condition assessment of each structure.
What you can see from the road.
What you can see from the road, or opening up the manholes,
Right.
or looking up from the end of the culverts where it discharges.
Okay, thank you.
I think where you're getting the 75% may have come from a previous comment regarding the stormwater utility plan, because we will follow with the stormwater utility plan. And with the county doing the inventory and the assessment or conditions of the assets, that represents about 75% of the stormwater utility plan. And then what Richard's team will do then is wrap the narrative around that and then create a capital improvement program, which will be the remaining 25%. So the bulk of that work has already been done by DeKalb. Now, that's not to say when Richard's team goes out and addresses a problem, they may have to video the pipes and find out, because it was just a cursory review of the conditions of the assets. But at least it's a good start, and where we get into more response on correcting a problem or assessing a problem, he'll make that determination then as to how deep he has to go into the pipes to see where the root of the problem might be, if it even exists there. So, but we have a very good start, and the information's coming from DeKalb at no charge to us, since all citizens helped fund that. So that's
But the net of the whole thing is, and where I was trying to go with it, and then I'm done with my question. I'm getting the feeling that you do not believe that the $48 fee as it stands today is really going to be sufficient to handle the maintenance of our system.
Based on what we've seen in other parts of DeKalb and in Dunwoody, which Dunwoody has a system that's about the same age as what we have in Brookhaven here, no, we don't. With the needs that we're going to have for pipe replacements and structure replacements and basic maintenance, we don't feel the 48 is going to be enough for that.
Thank you.
Richard, are we able to fund, for instance, street sweepers out of the stormwater fund? I know Chamblee does that, and they get credits back for picking up all this debris that normally often goes into the storm sewer. Do those two work together at all?
There is some, and it might be an interpretation for legal to address. There's some, depends on how liberal you interpret the language that's in the ordinance, as far as the money can be used to spend on anything that improves or addresses the storm drainage. Some cities have taken that to mean that street sweeping, gutter cleaning does meet that requirement. So it is a possibility. There might be some legal interpretation of that we would have to get clarification on before we would budget. And then, of course, it's a matter of budgeting the funds. You know, we adopt the stormwater utility. The council will approve the budget that's used for that stormwater utility as to where those funds get spent. In which, so the desire is to add a street sweeping program that could be budgeted out of the funds that are available.
And is that something that's pretty easily outsourced? You can hire
Yes.
street sweepers to come
Yes.
in?
I'm sorry, I do have one more question too. What if we take over stormwater, and then all of a sudden we get hit with a huge catastrophic event in one of these drains? What do we do for backup if our costs exceed our collections in the first year?
Well, one of the things we would do in preparing the budget for the stormwater utility that we would present for council for approval is setting aside money for contingency funds, and that's emergency contingency funds. just in case something like that happens.
Well-
But there's also money, also if there is a catastrophic event like that, depending on what the cause is, there's ability to reimburse from FEMA or federal or state agencies as well, so.
Okay.
What percent goes into the security fund?
Contingency fund, I mean, that's a matter of, as we start planning the budget to determine, I know in other cities, to start out, we might put as much as 20 to 30% a year into the contingency fund to build it up quicker. And then over time, depending on where that fund is, when we get to the second or third or fourth year, you might reduce the amount annually that gets set aside for contingency just because you've built up the fund. But in the first few years, you probably need to put 20, 30% of that money aside just in case, so you have it.
Do we know what the other cities did when they started up?
We know what Dunwoody did. I believe Dunwoody put about 20 or somewhere between 20 or 30%. I could find the exact number that they did. I'm not sure what Johns Creek did. I don't think Sandy Springs has a stormwater utility, so.
Neither of them do.
Neither of them do, okay. At Dunwoody, I think it was about 25 or 30% of the first 2 years budgets they set aside for contingency.
Did they have a similar type, 1.5 million?
Yeah, Dunwoody's at the $48 was about 1.4 million the first year.
Okay, so we're talking about $300,000 in reserve.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, that's good.
All right, number 2, L2.
We have bid out the auditing services, and Bonnie Klein can give you a briefing on that.
Actually, before I got here, Chris Pike just got the ball rolling on this.
That's a different,
That's it.
You're looking
regular meetings here.
Recommendation of auditing.
aren't we doing,
We're in the work session.
right, I know, but aren't we doing the amendment of agenda review?
No, we already did that.
Oh, just so happened that that one was stormwater first.
Yeah.
No, I thought we were just going down the agenda.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, yeah, no,
This happened around
yeah, I see. Okay.
All right, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Back in February,
Get them on the right page.
Yeah.
Chris Pike did an RFP for audit services and sent it out to all the firms he knew that did governmental auditing. Also put it on some websites, put it on the city's website, the Department of Administrative Services, the state purchasing websites. We got 4 good responses from 4 firms that do a lot of city audits. And Chris did an evaluation, I did an independent evaluation. We came up with the number 1. We both agreed on number 1 and 2. Actually 3 and 4 we had switched. But the number 1 pick was also the low bidder after we opened the cost proposal. So I feel real comfortable. They've done the audits on all the new startup cities. It's Malden and Jenkins. They've got an office in Atlanta. They're real big in governmental audits. So I feel real comfortable.
This is a 5-year contract, right?
Renewable,
Renewable year. I got you.
depending on funding.
Standard operating procedures. Excellent.
And what's the figure?
The government.
How much is it?
21,000.
21,000 for the first year, and actually goes down in the second year, and that makes sense because they'll have some learning curve at the beginning.
What was the high bid, do you know?
60 something.
Oh.
Yeah.
And they effectively work with you to sort of look over your shoulder. Is it independent auditing, or are they
Okay.
just, okay, so they're doing it?
They are, but they'll be a resource to me, and I can call them and ask them questions. And they do a lot of educational opportunities for their clients, like new pronouncements and stuff. So we'll work closely with them.
There was discussion about setting up an audit committee. Is that something that will be part of this, hiring of them, or is that independent from that?
It
or
would
how-
be independent, but
Okay.
it's always a good idea.
Well, is this our audit committee or their audit committee?
Our audit committee. It's an appointed committee that people look at. It was in I forget, one of the ordinances we passed early on, maybe the purchasing or one of those.
Is this done in concert with the company that's just being hired, or independently?
It
I'll
allows
let the
the
expert
auditors to
answer.
report to this committee instead of to management.
I
If
got
there's
you.
concerns, they can go directly to the committee or the council.
I actually think that's a pretty good backstop, because reporting to the parties that potentially
That may
could be
be part of it.
part of the problem would be a
I mean, you can operate without it, but I think it's a good idea. A lot of cities have them.
Do typically the cities have audit committees made up of citizens, or is it like a three-person, two-person council committee?
It's normally some citizens with a council
Okay.
representative or two.
But they're also looking at things beyond the financial. I mean, they're auditing service delivery and those types of things.
Not so much this firm. They'll be looking at compliance issues.
No, I'm talking about,
The audit-
yeah, the audit
okay.
committee is looking at, you know, sort of service delivery top to bottom, not just the financial.
I think it's an
Bang for
excellent
your
idea.
buck.
Yeah.
Type thing.
It would be
Yeah.
service delivery compared to your levels of service,
Yes.
to see if your level of service is meeting them.
Yeah, I'd almost like to call it an audit committee / process improvement committee, you know, I mean. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that there are ways that citizens and outsiders can look at things and see if we're doing a good job.
We'll look at that.
Again, that's a good thing to
We'll look
think
at that for the
about.
next meeting, possibly. Hot in here.
Yeah.
Air on.
Are we after
5
hours?
o'clock it turns off. We're getting some fans.
Go shades.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about that. All right, thank you. Intergovernmental agreements update, do we need to?
Just to mention, if I may, the Parks and Recreation, that is also somewhat caught up in the same situation as our police services. The amount of dollars that we agreed to and the method of how we would make those payments.
Mhm.
The dollar amount has not changed, but the method in which we pay, the frequency in which we pay, has now changed with the new county manager. So I know, Bill, you've had a conversation with the county attorney's office. And
Yeah.
so I'm waiting to hear from the county manager, Zach Williams, to go there, because it's now resting with him.
Yeah, it's-
So
it's
that's where the
starting.
change has occurred.
It's his replacement. It's done with about
Who did he
phasing.
replace?
Pardon me?
Who did he replace?
Richard Stogner.
All right, okay. I remember that. Okay.
And who is the new person?
Zach
Zach
Williams.
Williams.
He was the
Okay.
former county manager with Fulton.
Okay, anything else on that? All right, Force feasible town hall proposed code amendment update.
I'm going to turn that over to Susan, but if you'll recall, we were looking at a situation with the development that was trying to move forward with their project. They were zoned in the county, they had conditions assigned, a certain site plan, but the problem was that the type of unit that they were building was reaching difficulty in financing. So they wanted to come back in and change that to a fee simple so that the unit itself could be sold with the dirt under the slab. And so Susan has been exploring, investigating, and trying to find a solution to that, and she has, but now there's some other matters that have now presented themselves. So I'll let Susan pick it up from there.
Well, in our last work session, we talked about looking at different possibilities to find text amendments or a method to create a fee simple townhouse district in relation to that property. And in that regard, we did look at other jurisdictions. We did meet with the county personnel. We did try to find out what was occurring in DeKalb County and how they were allowed to move forward with this type of development. But having said that, I began to dig deeper and look at the site plan and look at the ordinance and meet with the attorney about this property. And I do have a meeting with the attorney Thursday morning. And I do believe that if they choose to move forward with the development of this property under the current zoning, with the 22 conditions that are on the property, and with the current site plan, I do not believe that they need a text amendment. And I do not believe that they need to rezone the property. If they can stick with the current plan and with the current conditions, I think it's a matter of how they presented it to the people that they were trying to get financing from. So we're going to meet more about that Thursday. In speaking with the attorney today, he did indicate that it was their desire to develop the current plan. It was the desire not to rezone the property. If they can do that and make that happen, that they do want to move forward with it that way.
Yes,
All right.
that's actually, yeah, this issue has been going on for such a long time, and I'm very, very happy to hear that we're potentially on an answer.
Has the neighborhood, have you gotten in contact with them about this?
In a previous conversation months ago, and it was a go.
Okay.
So, a lot of hurdles were overcome. This then became the next major hurdle, and this is very, very encouraging.
There still are a couple other hurdles. The attorney's aware of that. He said that they're willing to grab onto that and do what they can, but I think we're headed in the right direction. So we'll have a better update for you after maybe Thursday morning.
Well, thank you.
Susan, I just want to make sure I understand. How does the bank look differently at a condo versus fee simple?
I can't speak for a real estate term, but fee simple, you own the land under the ground on a fee simple townhome. Condo is all common ownership. I did question the statement that was made about the inability to finance the project. I did question that twice. And there were other parties that were meeting with us as well. And one of the comments made was that it wasn't necessarily that they couldn't finance it, it may be too difficult to finance it. So I'm digging a little deeper into that as well. So it may be how it's been presented to the bank, and perhaps not a clear understanding on the project itself. And it probably will require some type of formal action letter on behalf of the city from me, explaining to the bank what it is that they actually want to build on the property.
It's my understanding somewhere along the way, Fannie and Freddie changed their rules, and they don't allow you to. They look at a 6-unit condominium building as one building. They look at 6 fee simple townhouses as 6 separate units. So you can't finance, or you can't rent, or I forget exactly what, but there's something about 1/3 of the project has to be sold before you can begin financing. So it's the way Fannie and Freddie, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have changed their rules, and they look at the units differently. And the fee simple allows them to slice and dice the project easier from the standpoint of how they're providing the loan funding and those types of things. So it really is something that sort of trickled down from federal government lending standards and how they're reviewing certain things. And again, they see a condominium building because you only own the inside wall as being a 6-unit building.
Okay.
They see 6 fee simple townhouses together in a building as being 6 separate units. And somehow they've come up with in their mind, and again, I'm not an expert at it, but somehow in their mind they believe that the 6 separate units is more desirable than the 6 units together in one building. And their rules have sort of trickled down to reflect that. So yes, it's not impossible, but it's considerably more difficult to get financing for those individuals. And that's the same reason that Ashton Woods, at both of their projects, before we became a city, they went in and got a variance to convert those from from condo to fee simple. So they're now being sold as fee simple for the same reasons they weren't able to finance them going
So what
forward.
did we do for Ashton Woods? We didn't pass anything in particular?
DeKalb handled those. Kathy Zickard went in for a variance, and I'm not sure exactly what for, but she went in and applied for, there was a variance hearing prior to the city starting up sometime late last fall. I just remember I was at the meeting for another issue, and I remember she was there.
Well, there were some other changes on that property that was part of that variance. I
There's
didn't
some
remember that it was the fee simple.
very unusual things that DeKalb County apparently allowed to happen with tax parcels versus property ownership, which I would choose a different philosophy and interpretation of. So we can't go that route. But in speaking with the attorney, he's very clear, based on what we discussed today and based on the site plan that we have, and based on the approved zoning and the 22 conditions and what the current zoning of that property is with our CND, Conservation Neighborhood District, that district allows single-family, detached, and detached condominiums. I think there's a way to make this happen. without a text amendment and without a zoning, if they comply with that plan.
I'm glad to hear there's a solution to this particular project, but do you envision this is a problem that we will have come up again in other developments? I mean, is this something that, I would like our city to be developmentally friendly.
Right.
And if lending laws have created an unknown problem with our city zoning regulations, is that the case, and are we going to see this again?
Well, it's not really the zoning law, it may be the lending institution. And we really don't know the market that we're going to have for fee simple townhomes. Right now, this is the one that we have.
This is the only one.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Well, it'd be good to keep an eye on it. I mean, if I think some time ago we talked about having developmental meetings. If we haven't talked about having that, I would like to have on a regular basis some kind of developmental open house meetings so that we can get feedback from the developmental community about changes that are occurring in the marketplace that they'd like to see us address in the city.
If I could just make mention of it, and we'll be talking about this more in a future meeting, hopefully when we get to our retreat. But just in reviewing the zoning ordinance, and Susan and I spent a little bit of time doing that we'll want to come back and meet with you so that we can be available to the development community and to be able to make some changes. And one provision in the zoning ordinance calls out for what is a minor change and a major change to a development, and it cites that a minor change could occur in the field. And as a result of that, if that happens and there's a change to the land disturbance plans, then the property has to be posted and for 15 days and everything stops. And I don't think that's your intent, but because it's so restrictive and how it's written into the ordinance, the community development's hands are tied. She can't do anything to allow that to move forward. And there's some things I want to go over with you all to share with you that from a professional standpoint, she has the ability, to review that and make that determination and to allow a change in the field that occurs to proceed. In all my years' experience, and I would challenge anybody that has done any development, that I've never seen a project that gets out into the field that there's not some kind of change.
Right.
There's unforeseen conditions, and every engineer always, contractors always have that in their contract, because when they start grading, they don't know what they're going to pull up out of the ground, and something could occur that maybe there's just a slight modification. Well, when that happens, she's got to stop them, she's got to post it, and
does that have to do with your 10%?
No.
No. This is under the
No.
minor and major, if it's conditioned to a zoning.
What about that changing your 10% to 10%?
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that too. That's something.
Another meeting?
Yes, for the retreat, when we start looking at community development.
Retreat at Blackburn Park?
Yeah. Do we have any dates?
No.
Dixie cups and hot dogs.
Councilwoman Williams brought that
Nothing
up,
but the
and I
best.
do want to get a date. I'm going to be sending out to you, some prospective dates and to see when I can get everybody lined up together. But I really would like to have it before you all go to the Georgia Municipal Association. I think that would be very helpful to you as you sit in on some of the classes and meetings that I think will be more meaningful.
Yeah.
So that's what we're working for. Villa Christina has offered to host us. Need to go deeper into that conversation to see what that all means, but we certainly have plenty of room in the large conference room at City Hall, and that was my first thought, is that's where we would have it. But I would think for at least a day and a half that we could meet, and I'll be talking with the department heads this week in our staff meeting to get them geared up. But stay tuned. I will be reaching out to you on some dates. And I know we have a lot going on, a lot of busy calendars, but it's very important that we do this.
All right. 5, update on the moratorium overlay findings. That's you, right?
Yes, that's me. Let's see, where do I begin? In the last work session, the request of the council was for me to meet with several parties, and I met with, let's see, Joel Quarterman, Michael Elliott, Bill Draper. I've talked by phone with Jack Hundred, Eric Bozeman, who was part of the initial overlay LCI process. I've met with neighbors. We did post on the web a request for public input, and we asked for that by the 17th of this month in order to be able to assimilate all that information.
Have we gotten any?
We have gotten a lot,
Okay.
and I actually have a handout that I will give you. I didn't tie any names to any of this.
Is Kathy Forbes one of the names? Did you give him? Did you give him?
I exchanged an email with Susan, and first time I've ever known.
Kathy, have you seen this?
I haven't seen that.
No one has seen this.
And this is
I'm
public
terribly
document.
You're here
curious.
representing LCI, correct?
Huh?
You're here representing LCI.
LCI, myself,
And
Ben,
this,
Bill
this is the
The
Roberts.
PTCA.
And I'm gonna put this over here if anybody
You
wants
hand one to
copy.
Kathy. Let's try to get one for you.
Kathy.
And Bill.
Oh, yeah, we exchanged emails.
Yeah, and I wanted to follow up on that email,
Okay,
and I just haven't
great.
done it yet.
Sure.
He was in the BBC.
There you go. Okay, there's two there. Let's
This
see.
is the beginning of the overlay.
this is simply a compilation of comments from citizens that you received. There's no order, this is just a laundry list of what you've heard from citizens.
Correct, and
Okay.
also, the other parties I mentioned from the BPCA and from, the meeting with the former DeKalb personnel, Gary Cornell, I did meet with Gary as well. Before we go into this list, what I'd like to say is that, when you look at the Brookhaven overlay, the Brookhaven Peachtree overlay, if you take sentences out of context, it can lead you down the wrong path. And many times it does say that the overlay controls, the overlay controls, the overlay controls. And many times the overlay does control. But when it doesn't control is when the ordinance itself speaks clearly regarding an issue that the overlay does not address.
Right.
So in that particular case, and the driving catalyst for studying this was the density question. And very clearly, the zoning ordinance is the regulatory tool. There also have been inferences made to the comprehensive plan by different parties. The comprehensive plan is a policy guide. It's not a regulatory tool. And then the guidelines themselves, the overlay design guidelines, they do say in many instances that the overlay controls, but not if an item is silent in the overlay. If there's an underlying requirement in the zoning ordinance that says, this is what it is, then that's the way it is. Also, if there's a condition of zoning from a previous case relative to density, that is what controls. So when it comes to density, with that being the driving question for all of this study, in my opinion, based on what I've read, the people I've met with, what I've reviewed, the density is controlled by the ordinance itself.
The underlying
The
ordinance.
underlying zoning. Now, having said that, and gathering all the comments from all the parties, gathering all the input from the public, the list that I've given you runs the gamut from we like it to we don't like it to we don't want it to, use another city's guidelines to, there's some of the items on here are very pointed items to we don't want it in our area, we want it excluded. So the list is very long and very wide. What I've done is taken the liberty of underlining those things that I believe if you do want to address, and if you do want to address while the moratorium is in place, and if you would like to complete certain items prior to the moratorium, these are the ones that I feel that you should probably focus on the most and address the other issues later on. And that would be defining a story, outlining more specific parking requirements, because that ranged from the minimum to the maximum. So we need parking requirements for restaurants. Please don't park on our street. To parking decks, to how do you conceal a parking deck. So the list was very long when it came to parking. I know that there was a lot of concern, and it was expressed by many people about wanting to have sidewalk signage. And then also the definition of height. There were other variations or thoughts or comments about height, but I feel the one that you need to probably focus on is the definition of height.
Maybe I'll hold the comments till the end. Just the question was, the height seems pretty standard. Is it where do you start from? Is that? the
Well,
question?
there were comments made that perhaps we should look at allowing a variance to height, but I think that that may be coming from not knowing how to measure height. And so I think that we need to look at doing probably a base elevation around the buildings and then how you measure it from the base to maybe the mean height level. I mean, I can,
Just further
yeah,
definition.
it needs to be
on
further
how it's-
defined.
But it defined as the height from the sidewalk of the main front street?
It is, and then it goes to the top instead of looking at doing a base elevation and looking at giving some leeway to like the mean height level between the eaves and the ridge of the gable. And I think if we take a look at that, that may solve the problem or alleviate some of the concern. If the council if it is your desire to move forward with doing a text amendment at this point, I just kind of wanted to let you know the time frame that we're under to be able to get that accomplished and lift it within the 90-day moratorium. And what that would mean is if you formally ask me to move forward with a text amendment to the items outlined or other items as you're choosing, I would need to complete the text amendment by May the 8th in order to get it to the paper. And that would put this to the Planning Commission June the 5th, the first reading of council June 11th. And I'll need some clarification on whether we still require second reads.
Let me ask you this, I don't know what we do, but May the 8th, and then the planning commission's June 5th?
Planning Commission would be June 5th.
Is that, can the planning commission move up their meeting, or is that, or is there a certain time, we need 15 days for the paper?
That ad would run in the paper on May 16th, and then it would go to Planning Commission on June 5th. And because this is not a zoning, you don't post a sign, but
How far into the 90 days will that put us for it to be adopted?
well, I have a question for the city attorney. Do we still have second reads?
We do right now. I'm getting ready to advertise, and I think it's, the first meeting of June would be the third reading of the charter amendment if we pass it.
Okay.
So that's the first
Well,
meeting of June.
worst case scenario, the second reading would be June 25th, and I believe from our calculations earlier today, the moratorium went into place April 9th, so we're cutting it really close with July.
And the council
being the
is
90
out of
days.
town on June 25th. That meeting may get canceled.
Well, we need to see if we can move up any of these meetings with planning, with anybody. Yeah, if we don't need the second reading.
If you don't need the second read, it would be June 11th. But the 90 days is up like the first or the end of the first week of July.
Let's try to make sure it happens on June 11th. I mean, we have a meeting that day, or near that day? Council meeting? Or when?
And the planning commission meeting would need to be after we adopted
That would
the
be
ordinance?
No, the planning commission hearing is part of the process,
Oh,
the
okay.
public hearing process, because it's a text amendment.
Right.
So we go to him
That
first
is
as a
a council
recommended
meeting.
body.
First, second Tuesday of the month.
All right, so the June 11th is a council meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
June
we can
5th
do
is
one-
planning commission, June 11th is city council.
Okay.
Could she have a first
Well,
reading
I'm-
June 11th?
But the direction I would need, if you choose to do that, would
You
be,
need your stuff in by May 8th.
and are these the items that you would want to focus
We'll have to
on?
look at it. Some of them, I'm sure, but we have to look at it.
Density is not something you have underlined.
I do not.
How do you, going forward, to prevent some of the situations, what would you see, how would you determine density on a piece of property?
Density is the underlying
Zoning.
zoning
But
district.
if a property has multiple zonings, what do you go to?
I'll have to look at what,
The
the
first one
answer
is-
is it
Well,
depends.
I mean, we have apartment complexes that are being developed on O&I, single and multifamily.
Right.
So O&I doesn't allow residential.
Right.
So do you kick it out? You do single family is 1 unit per acre, or multifamily is 16.
Right.
You know, so we go from 60 or 70 to 1 to 16.
We'll have to get some language on that,
And,
figure out
you
what
know,
we're going to do.
And you mentioned the comp plan as being not a
It's not a regulatory.
not a regulatory document, but it does contain information relative to proposed densities that
Exactly.
I think need to be considered. But, you know, again, we're going to have properties that have multiple underlying densities. Some permit residential, i.e. apartment complexes, some don't. So I think what we need to do is somehow we need to include this, because it will be an issue going forward, and we'll have the same.
Include what, in density and what we do.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I think that- I
it's
think
not,
that-
it's
yeah,
your
I do.
prerogative. If
I
that's the
think
direction,
that-
that's the
yeah.
direction.
That was
So,
one that we had.
We need to find
Maria already marked
yeah,
that one.
Right.
an upset number for that.
Right,
Somehow.
we're looking at that, and I'm
Okay.
working with Susan on
So
the
we're-
density matter. I mean, she's done a lot of research already, and the point that you brought up, Mr. Iyer, where I think the problem that could have caused confusion in the development community, in the county itself, and in the neighborhood near the BPCA, or the BPCA, is that when the county found multiple zonings within a tract, they defaulted to the comprehensive plan, which is a guide. It's not a regulatory tool. It's not a zoning ordinance, and therefore took the future land use designation as the direction to assign density. And that is not the finding that Susan has made. It is the underlying zoning of the property. So, but give us a chance to look at that more thoroughly and be able to let Susan report back to you all on.
But even there, we
We have to figure out which one wins.
But
Well-
even there, what the county elected to do is they use the overlay massing densities, because the existing apartments are going up for 72, 73 units to the acre.
Mhm.
The comp plan is city center, which is 60 units max to the acre. So, there's a difference there that comes out of what's permitted under the overlay. So somewhere we need, and then we run into the situation where, the Bel Air property, the comp plan says it's suburban residential, which is 8 units to the acre.
but I think where
Yeah,
we
but-
are is
so-
that the zoning
anyway.
ordinance controls.
Yeah.
If the policy guy says something else, and the council chooses that you would rather that policy guide be the law, then we need to look at, do we fix the law? So
Correct.
that's kind of where we are.
Could we not revise the overlay to actually spell out the exact densities in these different parts of the, it's not that big of a
Or
parcel
or
here.
even just an upset number. It may not spell out a density,
What
but
number?
you put
A what?
maximum, maximum allowable density.
Okay.
That is sort of the over.
It seems to me
it's
the
an upper limit.
confusion is just what Jim was saying. In some cases, these parcels have multiple zonings.
Well, in the Bel Air, there weren't multiple zones, were there? There was just one.
But that's not a good example because I think the one that the best example are the two that are under construction, and some of the others where you do have multiple zonings, and some of which are we just somehow need to come up with something that.
I agree. I think it is important to address, but I also know that when the overlay was originally designed, it was a specific, they specifically chose not to address the underlying density.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious as to, the people from BPCA may know why, but it is, that issue has certainly caused unintended consequences in some of our developments. But I'd love to see your recommendations. Take the advice of the citizens and groups you've met with, and if you can give those recommendations in a one-page, or a concise document that we can look at by next week. It sounds like we've got 2 weeks to be able to firm up this, the text amendment by May 8th.
It's May 8th that it would need to be completed.
So it would be nice to have a week to be able to distribute the recommendations, to allow public input to say.
There'll be at least 2 public hearings. We'll have a public hearing, and the planning commission will have a public hearing prior to adoption. I mean, that's part of.
So the published amendment by the 8th is still not set in stone. We can change it going from there.
Right, the planning commission's a recommending body, so they will hear the text amendment, the public will be there to make their comments.
Yeah.
Then your public hearing is another opportunity for those to speak and people to make comments. And that's your opportunity to say, we like it like it is, we need this change, we should include this, we should defer it. It's your prerogative.
Yeah, well, I think we're doing, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to tweak some things while we're on moratorium, and keep the moratorium as short as possible with my mind. I know that's what you want to do. And then once we get that, with these tweaks, then when we have our comp plan coming up in the fall, we can just, have a bigger public discussion about all these things. But I think for now, we're just trying to preserve our overlay, but make it so that we don't have as many future problems for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And I was looking at it as part one, part two. Part one was, how does this apply?
All right.
Part two was, well, what are the things we need to look at?
Mhm.
And I know we have this 90-day moratorium, so I'm here to.
I appreciate you wanting to.
So what do you
get it.
recommend the next steps be? Would you draft some text amendments, or?
Well, I could draft the text amendments, and I was focusing on the story, parking, signage, and definition of height. But with your further direction as to, are those the ones that you would like to address, or do you have others that you would like to address?
Well,
I mean, there's some, but
I think we need to include density in
yeah,
that.
absolutely. Yeah. And the parking requirement.
But, yeah,
That's
she's
some-
got
that's
parking.
not in the- yeah, I know. I see these other ones.
Yeah, there
Well, I
are,
mean, yeah, but parking is,
there's no
Parking is a
ref-
huge thing.
yeah, there's no reference to restaurant
Yeah, there
as a
isn't.
code in the overlay, is there?
no.
To restaurant.
But that's part of the parking.
Right,
so-
so that's
Yeah,
one we need.
It's all
to-
inclusive.
Um,
Parking
Yeah,
was
you
minimum,
see-
maximum outdoor dining,
Right.
restaurant,
Right.
it's parking on
Okay.
streets, it's parking decks,
Yeah,
it's
so-
concealing parking, it's a lot of issues.
Okay. Yeah,
Traffic management.
I don't know that I don't know that you need to get done in a week if this is something that we're going to be able to, tweak, after that May 8th. I just wanted enough time to be able to allow the citizens and the council to really look at the recommendation
We'll have
before
that
it's
during
adopted.
the hearings. We'll have that during the hearings. This part is to get the
To put it in
for us
writing.
to her, and then she puts them together, and then we advertise it, and then the public comments on it.
Right.
We find the public really didn't want this one, we don't have to adopt it.
Right.
All right, so
And I
the
think
public has plenty of time.
the directive we've been working under has been looking for, first and foremost, technical review and amendments, and to provide through that review and reporting back through this text amendment process is clarity, because that's what we've lacked in administering the overlay. From the standpoint of density, Susan has done a lot of research on that, and she'll be able to easily include what her findings are there with these other major categories, and we can come back with that. The rest of taking a more in-depth review will be part of the comprehensive plan, as the mayor mentioned, and that's when the community will have ample opportunity to take a look at even going back in and maybe perhaps suggesting more specificity, more site location of this is what we're talking about where high density should be, and this is what we're talking about where transition should be. So I think, I want to be sure we make that available to the public, and the Planning Commission will be involved as each one of you will be, because we expect you to come to those meetings too, to be part of that process.
Yeah, please.
And if I could just add to that too, at the point at which you do go through the comprehensive plan process and you do adopt your own comprehensive plan, then we probably will need to go back to the zoning ordinance to create the tool to implement your policies. So that will come after the comp plan.
So the next step is what?
Susan will review now these categories that you all have accepted. She'll come back with text amendments, and she'll proceed then to get this before the Planning Commission, and then come back before the City Council.
Can I ask you a question? What is the role? I know you had a meeting, I was out of town when that meeting took place. How will you be working with the BPCA in developing those text amendments?
Excuse me, this is a work session, we just not, there's no public comment.
Oh, okay.
Just, may I ask a point of order? Will the mayor council need to formally initiate a request for the text amendment?
I think through this work session, that's what they're
that takes
asking
care of
already.
that? Okay.
Requesting.
Um,
Yes,
Thank you.
please.
Thank you.
That's right. Take that gavel.
One other quick question about that.
Hold on,
There's
Jim,
a-
Jim,
No, go ahead.
Okay, good.
Go ahead, he's,
Sub-area 1, sub-area 2. I know that I've heard it's not distinguished in the code of the overlay. Is that true? or
In
not?
the zoning ordinance, there's a boundary survey for the overlay, and there's also an outline of sub-area 1 and sub-area 2.
Yeah.
I actually have our GIS people looking at mapping that for us,
Yeah,
but I have found that there are two different boundaries,
Yeah.
one in the LCI package and one in.
right.
However, the ordinance we adopted is the boundary that we will have to use at this point unless we go through a process to change it.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure that we, those two, there is a distinction.
And it's in the zoning ordinance.
Right.
all right, your last question.
this really is regarding the moratorium itself. I've had some calls from some folks who are trying to get permits for second generation tenant space. And I just want to see if that's included in the moratorium, or if those should be, these are not new buildings, these are tenants have blown out, they're trying to backfill the space. Can somebody come and get a permit for that?
We have been allowing them to move forward, yes,
Okay,
sir.
so that is, okay.
Yes,
And
yes.
meeting tomorrow with somebody at Village Place who's got
Right.
2 tenants that have been told they can't get a permit, so I'll let them know that.
Tell them to give me a call.
Okay.
The permit techs have come to me every time they've had a question,
Okay.
just to make sure that they're proceeding with caution.
Okay.
But we have been allowing them to move forward.
And I appreciate that, but things where they're backfilling vacant space, then
Right.
that's something we should allow.
Because that's not a design question.
No.
That design was already established and
Exactly.
formed. It's filling it in,
And-
so
and-
that's not an issue.
Yeah, and if it's second generation, they're coming in changing out some fixtures and opening the store again.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, we've been letting them know.
Thank you very much, Susan.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the busy work you're gonna have with us this week, next week. Thank you. Court. You have a question?
No, I was just saying, like you have nothing else to do.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thank you.
And we're glad you're here.
I check with her periodically. You still happy? You happy?
Well, I keep asking her every Friday, you're coming back on Monday.
Class is half full.
All right, thank you again, Susan. Court update.
Court update. Well, we had a first court session. It went pretty well this week. We had 27 people here, and it was a good session. There were a couple of things that had not gotten onto the computer, but we got them on there, and got the folks in and out within about 2.5 hours, even though it was the first walk time through. And people are sitting there and learning how to do the workflow, and try to keep people in front of the judge and starting to understand sort of the timing of what they need to do to maximize everybody's efficiency while everybody's doing their part in the bigger.
Here's a couple of observations I made. It did run well, and it's interesting to see citizens happily paying the ticket and then coming outside and thanking me. I didn't understand where they came from or why, but they did. They were like, it went well. But just a process thing that y'all might want to look at is when you have the calendar, and I mentioned this to you, you have the calendar in front of the judge, and she's calling the names, and a lot of people weren't there is because a lot of them were at the front desk paying their fines. So there needs to be a process worked by the clerk up front. When somebody pays their fine while court is in session, they need to get a list and get them up to the judge real quick so they can, it just seemed strange that she called 27 names and there were maybe 9-10 people, and a lot of people, just because a lot of people paid their fines. The other thing, could you explain quickly the difference between a ticket or an ordinance violation where you have to appear? Doesn't mean you can't get a continuance if you're not going to be able to be there, but one where you have to appear and one where you can just pay your fine.
Sure. There's a methodology that's in place under state law that creates the ability to have what's known as a traffic violations bureau, and it's a fiction for entering a plea, and it builds in the safeguards of people understanding what they're doing, understanding that what rights they're giving up, and understanding the consequences of that action. And it's limited to certain kinds of traffic violations under state law. there are a number of traffic violations that are prohibited under state law. And the statute also gives the judges the opportunity to pull other cases out as they deem would be inappropriate. For instance, in Sandy Springs, no one under 21 can go to the Traffic Violations Bureau. They all have to come see the judge. And but that's not one of the requirements under state law, but that's an additional requirement they put on it over there. Suspended licenses, you can't go pay at the window. No insurance, you can't pay at the window. A DUI, you couldn't pay at the window. Anything that a serious injury, crash, you couldn't pay at the window. Anything that's a suspendable offense, you can't pay at the window. It suspends a license.
What about the civil type ordinances?
Well, that, here again, there is no provision in state law to do that. Because this whole fiction really is, it's a bond forfeiture. Literally, you post a bond, the bond forfeits, it has the effect of a guilty plea for a traffic violation. And that's how they set it up at the legislature. There's no provision, parallel provision for that in city ordinance.
So there's nothing to guarantee you're coming back, so that's why you're required to appear.
Well, there's
Because there's no bond forfeiture.
Well, there's no law that says the effect of a bond forfeiture is the same as a guilty plea in city ordinances as there is at the legislature for this limited number of traffic offenses that they've set up.
So just to clear up for citizens, if you know, some civil offenses, like the guy who came with he had several false alarms at his home or business, and he didn't understand why. He was not unhappy, he just didn't understand why he had to personally appear, where somebody else could go up to the window and pay a traffic ticket and not have to come into court, or they could pay it online. This man couldn't. It was for a non-criminal offense. Explain why he has to come in every time, or anybody with those kind of offenses has to come in.
Well, because in the court system, you know, there's as you already know, there's the presumption of innocence, there's the waiver of rights, there is the right to trial, you know, there's the entering of the plea, there's the judgment of the judge or the judge on making determinations of what the fines or other sentences ought to be. All of those things have connotations within the law that you have to meet those steps and those criteria. And while these are ordinance violations are not high crimes or misdemeanors, right, they are quasi-criminal. At least they are criminal, at least to the extent that they can have a summary judgment of up to 6 months in jail and up to $1,000 fine, right, which is the U.S. constitutional threshold for your right to have a jury trial. And so they have to come in and go through this process because that is what the judge is required to go through in order to accept a plea, giving them a sentence. A judge can't set a standard sentence for an ordinance violation. There are certain ethical considerations that judges can't preset. This is what your sentence is going to be, this is what it's going to be.
And that would allow, presetting would allow them to pay it online or pay at the window, but since they can't preset it, that's why you have to come in. So I just don't want citizens to be confused.
Well, it's not only that, there's no fiction that has been devised by the legislature to overcome the requirements that the judges have to ensure that everybody knows what they're doing when they take a plea. And so you have to come in front of the judge to do that.
All right.
What percentage is paying online or at the window rather versus coming to court? Have you seen any of those numbers? Any of our...
I have a few of them, but we've only had that one main session and then today, but like on our first court session, we had 4 to pay online. But we have been entering the numbers and getting it all in there, and we were online last week. So, but usually the online payments are usually pretty high once everybody
Once you
gets
get going.
Are we-
it going.
What sort of system are we using, Pam? Like
Syscon.
Syscon. Right. And what percentage should they take from receipts? Their credit card processing company
Yeah.
that also uses?
Yeah, there's
they-
processing fees involved.
I'd like to see those too.
Sandy Springs, I know, does a courtware.
Yeah.
You know, I just
Yes,
want to know
that's
that
the one I was familiar with. This one is different, but it's a good system.
Okay. Well, as long as it's price competitive.
Well, the Syscon system is a newer generation system than Courtware is. The Courtware is on a much older platform,
Mhm.
and it's really probably at the last stages of its viability unless they rebuild it. And what you're seeing is the courts are going to these new systems now that are going to marry up better with the police department, marry up better with your jail systems.
Mhm.
I still would like to know the percent. You know.
Yeah, I'll be glad to get
But-
that. And
Sure.
mention that, right now it's just a stopgap to take payments. We're
Right.
likely to put out an RFP
Okay.
for bank merchant services.
Okay.
And there's a state contractor that I know can beat the rate, because this is just to get us up and running.
Okay.
And it would be for all the sites where we take license payments. and
Okay.
fire and police and
Good.
all the-
Good
How
job.
about- What's the,
Yeah.
about a few months before we get into that?
Sooner than that, I was thinking.
Okay, good. Good to hear.
And then, you want to explain the resolutions, or do you want me to?
I can, or you can?
Speaking of fees and cost of court, when we adopted the schedule of fees back in February, we adopted processing costs and schedule of fees, but the fees did not have the processing costs broken
Right.
out in there.
Mhm.
So this resolution is just defining that processing fee is $40.
Okay.
So, and then the other one, when we were entering the tickets into our software system, we realized that we had adopted DeKalb County's fines and fees, but there was a couple that were off a little bit that we could not have that.
Because they were illegal?
I can answer that.
Isn't that what
We
it
got
was?
it, the state,
Let me explain.
you
it.
answer that one.
So they're the seatbelt and child restraint?
No,
There's
no.
limits that you have to
That's right.
charge.
I don't disagree. I think we ought to check those out.
Well, I don't disagree with that either.
I do, I'm not.
The,
So you let the kids hang on the
Not
bumper,
the kids,
go down
the kids
school.
one's different, the kids one's different.
the,
Kids in mind.
what happened to us is that we adopted at your direction, the same fines as DeKalb County had.
Yeah.
All right, and so, but what we found as we went through all these fines, some of these, part of the fine also was composed a library fee and a law library fee and one other fee. There was two fees that were county fees that had been added in there. And there are about 5 or 6 kinds of cases that have max fines set by law that were lower than the total fine that we had. And so we had the total, the fine was the same as the DeKalb County fine, just like you'd asked us to do. What's problematic was it was higher than what the state would allow you to pay as a fine. So, you know, the $100 fine that was the max, and then you added on all the county's fees, it was $190. Well, you know, we said it's $190, and we looked at all our fees. Well, that moved the fine up to $125. So we couldn't do that. So we need to move those fines down to the lower place.
And it's just these two fines, these two seatbelt fines?
There's 3 in there.
1, 2. Well, it's
Oh,
a
yeah,
second
yeah,
offense
yeah,
version
I'm
of
sorry,
it.
yeah.
So in that case, the $40 court fee does not apply. The total fee is just the $25.
No, you can't place processing fees on those tickets. The
Okay.
law will not allow it.
So where
that's-
the column says Brookhaven fine plus fees, the processing fee is in addition to that.
It will not apply to those 3.
Oh, it would not
because
It won't
the
apply
law
to
will-
it won't
the law
apply to
will
those
not
because
allow it.
those are not allowed, I believe it's an attorney general opinion, I believe.
Okay.
That says we can't put that fee on those particular ones.
What's the fee for adult no seatbelt?
$15?
You know, the seatbelts are 15. And those were correct.
That one we had, correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
The real adult seatbelt is, you can stop them. You can pull them over. You can see what they're doing in the car.
Say if
Civil
a seatbelt
libertarian,
in the
I
back,
don't know about that.
say if a seatbelt in the backseat of a truck. Does that apply?
No, that's an exempt, I think Tom Murphy had that exempted at some point.
Pickup trucks are exempted, SUVs are not.
If you have your sunroof open, would that be a?
No, I didn't put that chance to
All right.
focus on that one.
Mr. Mayor, can I add one item following court? We've got our police chief here, and I had asked him to attend the meeting today, just so he could give you a brief update on where he is in standing up the police department, and who he has hired thus far, and who he is recruiting for at this time. And then we've talked today, and I wanted him to share with you, because I know that you all are starting to take notice of the invoices that are coming in on purchasing cars, because we need to have those, and there's a lead time on ordering those. And then also now the next move is to order the weapons for each of the officers that they're going to have to qualify for. We had a conversation today regarding levels of service, and I'm very excited for the chief to share with you what his plans are for your police department.
All right.
Thank you, Mrs. City Manager. Well, first, it's been a hectic 5 first days, so we've been very busy. We've interviewed about 12 people so far. We made 3 hires. Ron Freeman, who all of you have met, he's our deputy chief. Brandon Gurley starts Thursday. He's going to be our sergeant, PIO, working with Megan on police matters. Megan already knows him. We also hired administrative assistant. She was actually involved with the startup of Sandy Springs, very well qualified. And the good part is it's an outreach to our Latin community. Her name is Rosanna Morales Romero. She's very well qualified. I talked with the previous chief that started up Sandy Springs. He highly recommended her. We're also in the process of doing background checks on another sergeant, lieutenant. And that being said, we're still vetting. We're not sure. We're interviewing for management positions, and we're not sure where they're going to fall into places, whether it's a sergeant or a lieutenant. But the nice thing about this whole process is we've got 14 additional interviews we're doing in the next week. But the nice thing about the process is we're just putting it on the website right now to advertise for positions. These are people that actually send in resumes. We get to pick the cream of the crop, which is very important to me to ensure we got a good police department running. Also, in addition to the in-between interviews, we've been going out and doing site visits. We met with the DeKalb County's North Precinct Major, a new major now, Major Jim Conroy. He's been very cordial to us. He's going to supply us with weekly crime statistics and crime maps so we can go over any issues we have. He says anything we want to do, he used to be in charge of the radio system, so that's our end of the radio system. He said it should be no problem with finding talk groups for us to use. We also visited Chatcom, made inroads there. Sandy Springs chief was there along with the deputy director. I gave Marie, the city manager, the information on steps to take if we want to seek that route. They have a very robust and very good records management system and CAD system, which we'd be looking at. Actually, a little bit better than the DeKalb counties, because they're going out to bid for a new system to try to improve theirs. And this morning we actually met with Dunwody's police chief, Billy Grogan, to go over any issues that he had and problems that he encountered. We found out he used a different radio than Motorola. He had serious issues with it for the first 2 years, and he said they were fixed for the portables, but they're still having issues for the mobiles. So we're gaining a lot of insight, and it's going to save us a lot of trouble in the future. Their portable radios, which are working very good, are actually $1,500 cheaper than Motorola. And talking about the cost, the cars that we did order are probably the most fuel efficient and most reasonable cars that are out there right now. So we're looking forward to getting those. We're working on logo with Megan, and I don't know what you call the group, but they're trying to come up with something, I guess, for all of you to see. Other than that, we're already taking some complaints from residents, and we're getting a lot of positive response from them. One of them involves a traffic complaint at Ashford Park Elementary School. Through that contact, we actually got invited already to a career day at the school, so we'll be participating in that. We took a complaint from a doctor in town about some burglaries and increased patrols that they wanted to see from DeKalb County. So we mentioned it to DeKalb County, and she wants to start a neighborhood watch. So a lot of positive feedback we're getting, and we're just moving on.
Service, emergency.
The emergency service. One of the things we're trying to gear the city, and we're still working out zone structure for the city and the patrol beats or zones as we're going to call them. We like to have a 3-minute response time for emergency calls. Checking with Dunwoody, they have a overall 7-minute response time. So most jurisdictions, 3 minutes is ideal, you know, to hit at least 80 to 90% of the time. And sometimes, depending on what calls for service are going on at the time and what's going on in the city at that time, there'll be fluctuations in that. But for the most part, we would like a 3-minute emergency response time, which means that we would have to keep, and supervisor would be responsible for keeping officers on both north and south sides of town.
How many zones, just off the top of your head, do you think we might have?
Well, right now, the organizational chart has 9 officers and 2 sergeants.
Zones, I said.
Well,
Off the top of my head, I'd say somewhere between 4 and 6.
as we start ordering cars and equipment and things, those all come before the council. Will have to approve those, or how are those acquisitions being made?
They're coming to my office, and they're coming under the state contract. So I'm approving those, and then we'll be sending that. I'll be sending that
Are we
information.
buying them, we're leasing them, or what?
Pardon me?
Are we buying them? Are we leasing them? What?
Well, we're talking about that right now, looking at a capital lease program, and then after a certain period, 5 years, that we would, then at the end of that lease term, we would be purchasing them.
What's the lifespan, I thought, on those cars? About 5 years.
Well,
A take-home car is going to last probably a minimum of 5 years,
Yeah.
because on a 12-hour shift, they're only going to use 14 to 15 days a month.
Right.
And the officers take a lot better care of them.
Yeah.
That's their office and their assigned car.
But the big bulk of the purchase, the big bunch of cars won't come for a couple of months. Or the bill for it won't come.
About 6 to 8 weeks is delivery. We had to reach, there was a April 12th deadline on ordering cars, otherwise we would have been out of luck and we wouldn't have a patrol force, or we'd be walking.
Coverage levels, is there a number of officers that factors into that response time, or have you made a determination on total number of officers that you'll need?
Well, right now it shows, you know, we're trying for 9 officers per shift with two supervisors. And then there's a lieutenant that oversees 2 shifts, you know, day shifts, and 1 lieutenant overnight shifts. That's a starting point. We're going to have to evaluate data and everything that comes in. But with those 9 officers and 2 supervisors, you're always going to have a minimum of one supervisor and probably a minimum of 7 officers there. So I think that would give pretty good.
And is that a
pretty
shift
good
of
coverage.
12-hour shifts?
Yeah.
So,
I think it's better than we're seeing right now.
So they do 3 12-hour shifts a week?
They work 3 days, they're off 2.
Okay.
They work 2 days and then they're off 3.
Oh, okay.
So every other weekend, I mean, it's ideal for a family situation.
yeah.
You know, to be honest with you, most of the officers are going to be here for over 8 hours anyway. So,
We currently have money set aside in the contingency. When do you think we'll have a budget for the police startup and at least going through the end of the year, and what sort of numbers, or when do you think we're going to be able to look at the numbers that
You're going to need.
Going forward?
well, we're getting ideas as we're moving on little by little. Badges, we got pricing on in Brad, and the staff here has been phenomenal as far as you know, getting bids, doing things the right way. So we got badges, the guns, I believe are being ordered today.
We need an idea of what you're going to require for the force that you.
We had that conversation this
Yeah.
morning with both the chief and, I did, with both the chief and the deputy, and we're going to be working towards that. I
like
really
next
don't want,
month or-
yes, because I don't want to go to a certain point without knowing what the millage
Sure.
rate is, because I don't totally yet have confidence in all of our numbers until that millage rate is set. But
Right.
we do need cars, we do need
Right.
the weapons, the uniforms, the
Bulletproof
badges.
vests.
Well, but-
Bulletproof vests. So, we need that. And fortunately, too, all of the personnel are not being hired all at one time. They're coming in phases, as will, the vehicles.
Yes.
So,
What we're trying to do right now is hire probably 4 additional command staff members to do all the vetting, all the ordering, and all the basic things that we need to do. And then the luxurious part about having the officers hired that are currently working, because we want a 3-year minimum of experience for the officers that we're putting on the road. They already currently have jobs, so we'll have the luxury of allowing them to work until we actually need them, which will probably be about 2 to 3 weeks before the actual start of our patrol efforts. And then we'll go into heavy training that week and touring the city and all that kind of thing.
Back to the comment about the military, I mean, until we understand fully what the budget is, we're not really going to be able to set the millage rate, because we're playing with those contingency dollars, trying to understand how much of those may be available or not. So at some point, I would hope that we would see something that is a suggestion of what it's going to take to stand the police force.
Gary, how are you finding the applicants that we're getting? I know there were days at City Hall where there were like 30 and 40 applications coming in and a day. And,
we're having people come in that both the deputy chief and I know. We're having people come from outside agencies. Just a lot of word of mouth. And it's kind of nice because, like I said, we can pick the cream of the crop, which is a nice thing to be able to do. Like I said, we interviewed 12, and out of the 12, we ended up with 3 and two more possibles.
What's the rough total of how many applications you think you've had?
Rick's actually collecting them, and some of them, yeah.
Over 100, and
So
the
far?
job descriptions were posted at 5 o'clock today. So we had 100 before they were posted. And also went to the media today, so it's on all the local TV stations. So we anticipate in a week we'll get a ton
All
more.
right, that's great.
and
Make you feel good that people want to come work for you?
I feel very good.
All right. All right. Okay, thank you very much, Gary.
Thank you.
All right. These two, RFP for sanitation and development authority update.
yes.
You can do these quickly.
Quickly, very quickly. We should have by the end of this week the RFP for sanitation services for the city. As you'll recall, at the last work session, we were talking about getting that out on the street to get an idea of what the cost would be. And we were looking at a pilot program, and we felt it was best served to create the RFP that was in a 2-part system. First part would be to have citywide services for sanitation, both residential and commercial. Subset of that would be a pilot program, and today we learned that a pilot program for a minimum size route would be 500 units. So we're going to include that as well, so that the vendor wants to bid on that. What our plan is to look at, and the level of service is the same as the county's level of service. So it will be twofold. The current level of service, twice a week pickup, as everyone is experiencing now, and then what the county is considering once a week pickup. We'll get that out on the street to the vendors. They can bid on that, and we'll ask for a quick turnaround from them so that we can then report back to council to see if this is something you want to proceed with.
All right.
So that's where we are there.
Similar subject, different topic. Don't we have to tell the cab by the end of the month?
No.
That's when the
Thank you
change-
for bringing that up. The mayor and I were on a conference call with the county late last week, and we were advised by Ted Reinhardt not to do anything because they didn't know what they were doing yet. So we are, it's
Indefinitely
business as
suspended.
usual right now, twice a week. So the level of service you all are enjoying will continue until the county makes a decision on what they're going to do. And then they'll be notifying us.
All right.
Okay.
Development authority update?
Development Authority update. I'm pleased to announce to you that tomorrow is their first meeting. It's really not a very structured agenda, even though I will have an agenda for them. It's for them to get acquainted, to better understand their role and responsibility as Development Authority members. The legal counsel for the authority will be there, Ms. Wendy Butler, and we'll be talking about what her role is and how that is coordinated through and with the city attorney. We'll talk about training because the state does require mandatory training for all authority members. Fortunately for us, unlike what is required in our ordinances for planning commission, they don't have to be trained before they have their first hearing. The state requires 12 months, so there's a 12-month period, so we'll be able to stagger that training. There is some training coming up. I believe it's in Rome in the month of May, so I will be canvassing the board members to see if anybody's interested in attending that. The other thing is that we'll be talking about some potential upcoming projects with them so that they're alerted to what that will be. I won't be able to give them a lot of detail yet, but I do anticipate that most likely within the next couple of weeks I will be calling them back. They're not like the Planning Commission or the ZBA, but more importantly like the Planning Commission where there are fixed dates, or City Council. They really meet when there is a need. So when the potential for a partnership or a bond inducement with a project, we'll bring them back in. I'll start developing what the application process is, what the application forms are. One of the things that we'll be talking about too is to get them to start thinking about what the criteria and the threshold is. I mean, we want to be sure that we are, especially in bond inducement, if we're going to induce a project, we want to be sure that it fits into our overall plan, that it makes good economic sense, that it will be a return on investment for us. So we want to be sure that not only will this project bring in employees or whether it be housing, that we want to be sure that there's sustainability and that there's creditworthiness from the applicant as well. So real excited. I want to thank you all for the appointments that you made to this authority. My goodness, they are so strong, and I look forward to them being very busy. So that's tomorrow at 10:30 at City Hall. Thank you.
One question on the development authority. Do we have, I know we've discussed the potential hire for the city of a professional economic development director. Do you have a time frame when you think we'll be able to add that staff position on for our city?
I'm hoping that we'll include that in the 2014 budget. That's been my plan all along. But the Development Authority is housed out of the city manager's office because of the relationship to mayor and council, and because of what they're doing on behalf of the city. That's where I've housed it now, and I'll be their liaison, their staff member. And one last thing too, we are required by state law to register the authority, and we've already done so and received confirmation from the State Department of Community Affairs, so we are ready to go.
All right. All right. Other business? I wanted to, real quick, just on the agenda, since we didn't go over the agenda fully, there's one action item 2. You might have any questions about this? Maybe everyone's agreement for the energy excise tax?
Could we get an explanation of it?
There's an energy excise tax that the county's passed that they've imposed this tax.
When did they pass it?
I believe it was last month. But it's passed by them already, and they're waiting for us to pass ours. We have 2 choices. We can either pass it and we can take our component share and they'll send us the money, or we don't pass it, they'll keep the money and they'll put it in the county general fund.
And what is it?
How much is it? What's all that about?
What is it? What's tax?
It's an energy excise tax on industrial, I believe is what it is. And they passed a tax on this, and part of the state scheme is that the cities get a portion of it back, and they have to give it back to us if we want it, and it goes into the general fund. So,
what kind of numbers are we talking about here?
I can't tell you the numbers on this one.
But it's only industrial?
So the
energy?
county, hold on, before we get to all that. So the county passed a tax. Is it right now in effect for Brookhaven?
It's in effect for Brookhaven. And you have 2 choices. You can either get your proportionate share back, but they have to give you as well as the other cities, or if you choose not to, they're still going to
take the tax?
They're going to take the tax and they're going to put it in the county fund.
We can't vote to say we don't want that tax to apply to Brookhaven.
No, you cannot.
Why is that on this issue?
Because they set up a special district,
Oh.
which is countywide.
They have a special.
Doesn't give us a chance to say, no, we don't want it.
No.
All right.
They just give you a chance to leave it with them or take your share.
Okay. Make that clear. We have no choice.
No new taxes. Sorry.
Well, it's not as if residents are going to receive additional tax being imposed on them in any form. It's already there. It's just a matter of us claiming for our use so we can direct it to the most beneficial purpose.
That's exactly right.
Okay, all right. Anybody have any more questions about that?
Well, it's still not clear who's actually taxed. I mean, it says it's for the sale, use, storage, or consumption of energy. Is this mostly industrial or
stations?
commercial?
It's industrial.
And where does it say that?
Well, I think
I'll be
it's,
glad to give you a copy of the law, council member.
Don't we have it here?
State statute.
I think the impact to our community is it speaks to our competitiveness in the marketplace for this segment of business. And I think I'd like to know at some point what kind of tax that is in that industry. So if there are industry people who are paying that tax,
I'm glad to
please.
give you a copy of the statute. I'll go make one during the interim between the two.
But I think the only thing that we can do anything about it is, other than accept our portion of the tax rather than
Let me ask this
let it
question.
go, is that we look at that down the road in our economic development plan to try and address.
Suppose, is there what's the time limit, or is there any, are we losing any money by not adopting this tonight?
You're going to either be in or out of it.
I don't, well, no. Well, in 2 weeks, you're going to be in or out of it?
The county, I can't answer that one. They've just asked us, have we not passed it yet? And I said no, and they said, please pass it because we've passed our side.
J-Max,
Yeah.
what's your concern with moving?
Well, because we haven't had a chance to vet the ordinance, the agreement. First read. I'm not
Even
saying-
if we understood it, there's no impact we can make to change it.
Well, that's what, yeah.
I mean, that's one-
I trust Bill, I trust him, but
I'm glad.
the lawyer in me's starting to, I gotta take a breath.
I frankly don't know that much about the energy excise tax, except to the extent that I know that they tax the industrial capacity of the folks in the industrial area.
And I see that it's a state statute.
And the statute provides, when the county does it, that they have to share it back with the cities, and they make it a countywide option.
The only thing that just set off my little alarm bell, it just says, in accordance with the state statute, following the execution of the agreement by the county and each municipality, the county agrees to adopt an ordinance levying the tax. So they're saying, if we agree with the county, then they can do it. Then they can levy this. That's what this says. The county agrees to adopt an ordinance levying the energy tax.
If you look at the distribution piece, you got that up there again?
Oh, yeah.
Section 5, county ordinance adoption.
I understand that. Pull up your state statute.
I mean, I don't question the state statute. It's the code section is listed under the language here.
Well, the state statute,
Each participate. If you elect not to participate, as Bill said earlier, then the monies that are assessed to Brookhaven are going to go back into a pool that you don't receive that.
Right.
you don't have a veto power over the county work.
Right, okay, well, I know, but this language says, following the execution of this agreement by the county and each municipality, the county agrees to then, after we agree with the county, adopt an ordinance levying the energy tax.
It
So
says each participating municipality.
Participating.
It does not say each
Right.
municipality, it says each participating.
But what the enforcement language or the active language is that we agree to do this with county, then they adopt the tax. I'm trying to be difficult, I'm just reading it as it says.
But J-Max, it also says that it's effective on the first day of the next succeeding month following adoption of the ordinance. So it kind of seems the time is of the essence.
Well, I think Jay's point is that if we were to not adopt it,
Would hold up the whole thing?
well,
The
that
county
they would
says the
not,
county cannot
they would not be able to
levy the tax.
levy the tax.
That's not correct.
But
I
But
might be
this is
incorrect.
our ordinance that we're reading. This is not their ordinance, so.
Do we know if the county has passed the ordinance? On their-
Yes.
Well,
yeah,
they're
on
collecting
their
it,
side.
so we have to assume yes.
The county, the deputy county attorney has informed me that they've already passed their ordinance.
Do we know if the other municipalities included in this have?
I an answer to the.
So if we do a first read tonight, if we find something out we don't like, we can not adopt this.
This is an intergovernmental agreement, it's not an
Okay.
ordinance.
All right.
So if you approve it, it's done.
All right.
Any chance to rescind it down the road?
There is a,
Yeah.
Why don't we just, we got 40 minutes until the council meeting. Why don't y'all do a little work on that and we'll
Sure.
talk about it 5 minutes ahead of time. If that's all right with y'all.
Right.
I just would like to pay attention to section 5. If y'all could look at section 5, that language is just, it seems pretty clear.
What you have here is what was provided to us by the county.
Gotcha.
The county wants us to pass in order for them to send us the money.
Gotcha, I understand.
And so,
Did you see where the money goes if we say no? It goes to host, it goes to water.
Correct.
we see.
Only thing I'm not saying we shouldn't take the money, the only thing I'm saying is, if this language looks like to me, I could be completely wrong, that in order for the county to levy the tax at all, we have to agree to it.
Well, I think this was
That's my only
done,
question.
it was done before we came into existence, and I think they passed it. So now we come into existence, we want to get the share that comes here, we have to
I
validate.
understand what all that is. I'm just saying, so what the language that we're adopting, the law, says the county agrees to adopt the ordinance after we agree to it. And that's the only issue I have, is that this, what we're passing and voting on says the county will do this once we agree to do it. So I don't want to be unclear about what that means.
And I understand, to take that next step, you're saying if we don't adopt it, there's no way they can levy the tax.
Correct, possibly, correct. That's what this says. I don't know, could be wrong.
So defer to legal opinion on this.
Just want to be careful about it, rather than just not. Okay. All right. Anything else? What was else on the agenda?
we do,
I've lost my agenda.
Other business announcements?
as the court costs and the fines, which Susan has already gone over with you on those resolutions.
Right, okay.
So that's all that remains. We do have an executive session on the agenda. Some of you have asked
For the work session?
Executive session.
So we'll close the work session and then open an executive session.
After now.
You can amend the agenda for the work session and have your executive session right now.
Right. Or after your council meeting, either way.
You can do it after your council.
What do y'all want to do?
I'd prefer to get it over
How
now.
long will it take?
I think the executive session would take
20 minutes?
15, 20 minutes max.
15 time is it?
The level of detail that I would anticipate you getting in this interim is telling you about 5 minutes of where we are,
All right,
what we're doing,
Okay.
where we're at review,
Yeah.
and get some more direction from you.
all right.
And that would be about it for this. This is a cursory, we want to let the interim, here's where we're going and what we're doing.
All right, let's do executive session now. Or
Yeah.
let's adjourn the work session.
Well,
Before
we
you
have to
amend.
amend the work session
All right.
to add executive
Do you need a
session.
motion for that?
Yes.
I will move that we amend the work session, the regular city council meeting to move the executive session to our current work session meeting. Do I have a second?
I second that. If I understood it
Any
correctly.
discussion? All right, all in favor of adopting the amended work session motion, signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right.
Now-
First executive session?
Now motion to go in.
Now we gotta do a motion to, all right, now,
What
move.
reason, what reason?
what reason? Okay.
Plan acquisition.
It's our first one, right? Trying to make these
Are you
pretty quick.
adjourned?
No.
No, not yet. No, keep it going until I'll do this.
The fat lady say nothing.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we commence our
Move to go into executive session for one land acquisition matter.
I move that we go into executive session for one land acquisition matter.
I second.
Acquisition. Any discussion? All right. All in favor of the motion as stated by Councilman Madison, signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, no, we're still in session, so I'm not done.
You can't talk about anything except what you're doing at this time.
We do it right here, or we do it in another room?
Thank you.
Okay, we can eat while we do this.
Yeah.
But it's.
Was it? Okay.